August 20, 1989, crept into Beverly Hills like any other summer night. Palm trees swaying, mansions glowing under soft street lights, and silence so clean it echoed. But inside one of those mansions, the Menendez estate, something else was brewing, something cold, deliberate, and irreversible. Erik and Lyle Menendez, two young men who seemed to have everything, money, cars, privilege, were pacing in the darkness of their home. The house smelled of expensive wood polish and ocean breeze air freshener, but beneath that, there was tension. A tension that felt like it could shatter glass. Their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, were in the den watching a movie. To anyone else, it was a peaceful family night. But behind closed doors, behind years of pressure, fear, and emotional chaos, the boys believed they were trapped, cornered, living under a controlling father and a mother drowning in her own turmoil. And so, they made a decision, one they believed would free them forever. But in truth, it would do the opposite. The boys approached the den slowly. The house was too quiet, eerily quiet. The ticking of the clock in the hallway felt loud enough to be heard across the city. And then, everything changed in an instant. A thunder of gunshots shattered the air. The den became a storm of panic and violence. It was fast, terrifying. And then suddenly, still. Dead still. Erik's hands were shaking. Lyle's breathing was shallow. The plan was supposed to make them safe, but instead, it made the world feel like it was closing in around them. They fled the house, speeding through Beverly Hills streets, practicing the story they would tell police, hoping their voices would sound steady when they said it. When they returned home and dialed 911, Erik's screams echoed through the phone, raw and panicked. "Somebody killed my parents." Police arrived to a scene that was both horrific and confusing. The mansion looked untouched. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. Yet Jose and Kitty lay lifeless in the den. The crime scene felt wrong, too clean, too controlled. But the boys were emotional, crying, shaking. They told police it must have been a mob hit, that their father had enemies. And at first, strangely, police believed it. For a moment, it felt like the brothers had pulled off the perfect crime. Suddenly their lives changed overnight. They started spending money fast, almost recklessly. Expensive watches, private tennis coaches, luxury cars, overseas vacations. Lyle cut his hair and dressed like a businessman. Erik tried to bury himself in sports and acting classes. They didn't look like grieving sons. They looked like boys who had just been handed the world. But there was something else the police didn't miss. Fear. The brothers seemed terrified, not of losing their parents but of something else. Something invisible. For months detectives watched them. And every time they smiled in public or swiped a credit card, suspicion grew. The crime just didn't make sense. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. Nothing was touched except the bodies. And when detectives dug deeper, they began to see cracks. Cracks in the timeline, in the boys' behavior, in the story itself. The perfect crime had a fracture. Then another. Then another. Until finally, the detectives found the one thing that would blow the whole case open. A secret. A confession. A moment caught behind closed doors with someone the boys trusted too much. And just like that, the perfect crime was no longer perfect. It was unraveling. And fast. The aftermath of the Menendez murders drifted across Beverly Hills like a toxic fog. At first everything looked controlled, almost polished. Two grieving sons, a devastated community, detectives searching for answers. But beneath that quiet surface, something darker was taking shape. Something the brothers could never have predicted. Something that would rise from whispers, tape recordings, guilt, and fear, eventually tightening around their lives like a noose. The beginning of the end started in the most unexpected place. A therapist's office. Erik Menendez, the younger and more emotionally fragile brother, was drowning. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating, and no matter how much money they spent or how many vacations they took, the weight of what happened in the den that night pressed on his chest like a boulder. To the outside world, he and Lyle were simply living through tragedy. But inside, Erik felt as though every shadow in their mansion was watching him, waiting for him to slip. And as the weeks passed, he began to unravel. Lyle, always the more controlled one, kept telling Erik to stay calm, stick to the plan, trust in their alibi. But Erik couldn't. He carried nightmares everywhere he went. People around him noticed the trembling hands, the sudden panic attacks, the way he avoided certain rooms of the house as if something inside them might speak. Fear had turned into paranoia, and paranoia was turning into confession. That's when a family friend recommended Dr. Jerome Oziel, a Beverly Hills psychologist known for helping wealthy clients cope with trauma, fear, and stress. No one knew it yet, but this choice would set off a chain reaction that would destroy everything. The first time Erik sat in Oziel's office, he felt as though the walls were closing in. The soft lights, the quietly humming air conditioner, the carefully arranged furniture. It all felt staged, like a set for a scene he didn't want to perform. Oziel sat across from him, calm, attentive, patient, waiting for Erik to open the door just a little. It didn't take long. Erik had been carrying the truth alone for too long. One session became two. Two became four. And then one day, with his voice trembling like a sheet of paper in the wind, Erik said the words he had been choking on since August. "We did it," he whispered. "We killed our parents." Dr. Oziel didn't react at first. Not visibly. But inside, his world shifted. Therapists deal with secrets, confessions, trauma, but this was different. This wasn't pain from a tragedy. It was an admission of murder, one of the most shocking crimes Beverly Hills had seen in years. Erik spilled everything. Every detail. The fear they felt growing up, the emotional pressure, the night of the shooting, the panic afterward, the plan they had practiced. It poured out of him like water breaking through a dam. And Oziel listened, recording every word. It was supposed to be confidential. Protected. Locked behind therapist-patient privilege. But hidden beneath Oziel's calm exterior was a man with his own complications. Personal, emotional, even romantic. He had a mistress, a woman named Judelon Smith, whose involvement with him was already messy and volatile. Their relationship was filled with jealousy, manipulation, and emotional tension. And one night, Oziel let something slip, something small enough to seem accidental but big enough to ignite a fire. He told her that Erik had confessed. Judelon froze. The room felt colder. The air felt sharper. She looked at Oziel like she was seeing him for the first time. Why was he telling her? What did he expect her to do with that information? Her fear of Oziel, fear that he was controlling, unpredictable, suddenly fused with a fear of the Menendez brothers themselves. This wasn't just a secret. It was a weapon. And Judelon was terrified of holding it. The fear grew until it pushed her to the one place where secrets go to die, the police. When she walked into the Beverly Hills Police Department and spoke to detectives, everything changed. Up to that moment, the investigation was still blurry. Detectives had suspicions, lots of them, but nothing solid. The brothers' spending spree after the murders raised eyebrows. Their shifting stories raised more. But suspicion wasn't enough to make an arrest. Judelon's revelation was the missing link. When she said the words, "Erik confessed to his therapist," the detectives didn't just listen, they leaned forward. It was as if the fog around the case finally parted, revealing the truth that had been there all along. Judelon told them what she knew, piece by piece, detail by detail. The detectives took notes at lightning speed. And when she finished, the room fell silent. This was it. The crack in the perfect crime. Detectives immediately pulled Dr. Oziel in for questioning. At first, he tried to brush it off, hiding behind confidentiality. But investigators were relentless. They reminded him that if he felt threatened by the brothers, or believed anyone was at risk, he was legally allowed to break confidentiality. And with every question, every raised eyebrow, every moment of pressure, Oziel cracked a little more. Finally, he admitted that Erik had confessed. Then came the bombshell, the tapes. Oziel had recorded some of his sessions with Erik, capturing the trembling voice of a young man confessing to one of the most infamous crimes of the decade. The detectives didn't need fingerprints. They didn't need a murder weapon. They had Erik's voice, raw, emotional, undeniable. The momentum shifted instantly. Detectives were now certain. The case they had been circling for months suddenly felt clear, sharp, almost painfully obvious. But there was a problem. Erik wasn't in the country. In a moment of panic, long before Judelon went to police, Lyle had urged Erik to leave town, afraid his emotional breakdown would attract attention. Erik flew to Israel under the excuse of a tennis event. The investigators had to be careful not to lose him altogether. So they waited. They watched the airport. They monitored flights. They talked quietly with federal agents. And when Erik finally returned to Los Angeles in early March 1990, the trap snapped shut. As soon as he stepped onto American soil, detectives moved in. They surrounded him with a quiet, cold calm, no yelling, no chaos, just purpose. Erik looked startled, like a man waking up from a dream he'd been fighting to stay inside. Lyle was arrested the same day. The news spread like wildfire. Television screens across America flashed their faces, two young, preppy, wealthy brothers being led away in handcuffs. Reporters swarmed the courthouse like bees to honey. Helicopters hovered. Camera lenses pointed in every direction. The Menendez brothers became a national obsession overnight. The trial that followed would become one of the most polarizing, emotionally charged legal battles of the 1990s. The courtroom transformed into a stage, lights, cameras, crowds, and the brothers sat in the center, not as faceless criminals, but as haunted young men recounting years of emotional turmoil. They spoke of strict rules, impossible expectations, and a father who controlled everything down to the way they breathed. Their lawyers argued that the boys had lived in a silent war zone for years, that they saw no other way out, that the shooting wasn't about greed but survival. The prosecutors saw it differently. To them it was simple. Two sons wanted their parents' fortune. They pointed to the spending spree after the murders: luxury watches, restaurant bills, business investments, condos, travel. They told the jury it wasn't grief fueling those purchases, it was freedom, and greed, and relief. The courtroom became a battleground of emotion versus evidence, trauma versus motive. Each side delivered arguments with surgical precision. Witnesses cried on the stand. Jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Reporters typed furiously, capturing every twist, every tear, every heated exchange. The public was torn. Some viewers saw two young men who had cracked under the weight of a cruel upbringing. Others saw two privileged killers trying to twist their way out of punishment. Day after day, testimony stacked like bricks, building a story of family chaos, fear, control, and choices that spiraled beyond redemption. And as the trial wore on, the brothers sat side by side, sometimes holding back tears, sometimes staring blankly at the wall as if replaying the night they could never escape. In the end, despite all the emotion, all the testimony, all the arguments, the jury came back with a verdict that would echo across America. Guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty without the possibility of parole. Life in prison. No freedom. No future. No second chance. The perfect crime they thought they had committed unraveled not because of fingerprints or witnesses or hard forensic evidence. It unraveled because of fear. Because of guilt. Because Erik couldn't carry the weight of that night any longer. It unraveled through a single confession, spoken in a quiet room to a therapist who couldn't keep it hidden. It unraveled when love affairs, personal tension, and human weakness collided with truth. The Menendez brothers, two boys who once lived in a mansion with palm-lined driveways and luxury cars, ended their lives behind bars, separated from the world they fought so desperately to break free from. And as the years went on, their story remained a warning whispered in true crime circles. No crime is perfect. No lie holds forever. And even the quietest confession can roar louder than any gunshot. In the end, they weren't undone by detectives or evidence. They were undone by themselves. By their fears. By their words. By the truth that slipped out in a moment of vulnerability. The perfect crime wasn't perfect at all. It was only a matter of time before the cracks split open, and everything came crashing down.